Okay, so 166. Just to remind you, last week we stopped with
I'll just pass it around.
there was no first we said there was no old age or no physical symptoms of old age until Abraham got old and was actually considered a blessing. Abraham prayed for it and he got it, and then there was this little bit about there was no illness, no physical signs of illness until Jacob became ill. It really means like fatal illness. So there was no fatal illnesses and illnesses that would tell you that you're going to die. That didn't exist until Jacob. So before that, there was no old age. People lived a certain lifespan, but then they just dropped dead. Until Jacob, they didn't know they got old. Like there was physical signs of aging, but they weren't sick, so they had no idea when they were going to die. So God blesses us with diseases and illnesses to let us know that we're going to die. Right? It should keep those far away from us. Right? God bless and keep those illnesses. Right? Yeah. I know. All right. So interesting. Some interesting stuff there. And so now we're going to pick up on that theme and then quickly go back to. And I really do think this is going to happen this week. Go back to the laws of how you're supposed to treat your employees. So page 166 at the top. Ad Elisha, until the prophet Elisha, lo havach dechalish ve'itpach. There was no such thing as illness and then recovery. So, because of Jacob praying, God invented illness, and then there was a natural progression to illness. You got worse and worse and worse, and then you died. So until Elisha apparently, and the rabbis are just finishing this whole midrashic train of thought. Elisha was the first person that became ill but got better. So there's the possibility. So God invents the possibility that you can get better. Okay. Ata Elisha ba'arachame, because Elisha then prayed and said, it would be great if I didn't just die from this illness. Is there a possibility that we could have recovery, reversal of illness? V'itpach, and he got better. Now here's the proof text, and then I'll go just a quick, maybe, bit into more deeply into the story. Shene'emar, ve'elisha chalal et cholyo asher yamut bo. So the text, the narrative is that Elisha got sick from the illness that would kill him. Miklal dechala chole achrite. So a logical principle is that because it says he got sick from the illness that would kill him, we learn, or we can assume, that there are previous illnesses that didn't kill him. Because just by the fact that they specify this is the illness that killed him, we understand that there were illnesses that didn't kill him, so there were illnesses from which he recovered. That's the proof text. So here's some interesting things about Elisha that they don't say here, but I think the educated reader, and the Talmud is only talking to educated readers, would be assumed to understand. One is that Elisha is somebody that actually did heal other people in his lifetime. So there's actually a Torah, it's a famous story where there's a kid that gets sick, some kind of brain injury.
And the mother.
And the mother is a friend of Elisha and calls him, and Elisha brings him back to life, but in fact just heals him. So that's one thing to know. And the other thing is there's another story where Elisha, it's also another Haftorah. Elisha heals an Assyrian general who has leprosy. Now, one interesting thing is, and I told you before, don't play too many logical games with these stories. These are basically sermons, and they don't stand up to rigid scrutiny from the doctors in the audience, or even from the Torah scholars in the audience, because they're just kind of having a sort of play at this. But when it says that Jacob is the first person that experienced illness, we already know that that's not correct because there was leprosy in the Torah a long time before. That's the illness I was thinking of. I mean, that's definitely in the Torah. Now, it may be that leprosy is not considered a fatal illness. It actually wasn't in those days. He didn't seem to die from it. So maybe they're talking about fatal illnesses, or leprosy is so clearly a punishment and not, a biological illness per se, or it's not something that comes from the biological forces within, but from without. So maybe they're ignoring leprosy, or maybe we shouldn't try to find consistency in this, and they're just kind of playing around with ideas. But what I want to say is that Elisha does heal a person that has leprosy, a general, an Assyrian general, which is a very interesting story, lovely story, a story that's also full of meaning. All right, I want to, yes, sure.
Sort of a scholar's approach to this. I don't think Hebrew at that time had punctuation. Is that correct?
At what?
Punctuation.
At what time?
Well, even at the time that they were writing the Talmud.
The 5th, 6th century. The
reason why I asked is that the illness that killed him if there's a comma there, then that means the illness which happened to kill him, instead of, if there's no comma, the specific illness that killed him. I mean, that punctuation. So you really could make two interpretations.
Oh, yeah.
Depending upon what the punctuation
Well, yeah, so you're suggesting...
is lacking.
Yeah, so you're suggesting maybe they misread the text,
No.
which which is quite possible.
I'm saying that as all Talmudic texts seem to have, there's more than one interpretation.
Right. And it's not unlikely that that they misread it on purpose. They were looking for this proof text because they're playing this game. It really, and when I say game, I don't mean to trivialize it. They're trying to find deeper meanings, and in trying to find deeper meanings, to being very creative, playful with the text itself. So, because clearly this text doesn't mean that he's the first person that recovered. But when you get into this midrashic mindset, you can go with it a little bit, and then it also it brings you into the character of Elisha, who not only got sick and recovered, but he was actually somebody that healed people. So presumably his healing powers came after he'd been sick and recovered, because if he's the first person to recover from illness, then he's also able to heal other people. Somehow that enables him to heal other people, because there aren't that many characters in the Torah. There are a few, but there aren't that many characters in the Torah that have healing powers. Elisha is one of them. So the fact that they picked Elisha as the first guy to recover from illness, and in the pshat itself, in the text itself, he also happens to be a healer, someone with healing powers, that can't be a coincidence. Obviously they picked him because of that.
Right.
Yeah, so somehow the act of recovering from an illness can lead you to be a healer.
Right.
The best healers are people that recover from illness. That's interesting.
So why would you have a healer if there was no illness?
No, it's after there was illness. You didn't recover. You got sick and you died for Elisha.
But then there's that famous prayer that Moshe asked God to heal.
I know, that's right. So, but that's leprosy. So leprosy seems to be this big exception, and that's where I go into. Let's not get too so consistent for it. Or I could give you a kind of a stretched explanation that leprosy is not really an illness here. It's a punishment.
Right. Okay.
Ron, were you going to say something?
Didn't Elijah also heal someone before Elisha did?
I haven't looked it up, and maybe. All right, we're going to go to Tanu Rabbanan. All right, now as long as we're on the subject of Elisha and illness, Shlosha cholaim chala Elisha. Elisha got sick 3 times. Okay, now we're going to talk about each time, but each of them. So here is each of them was a punishment for a specific sin. So now we go deeper into the Elisha story. Elisha is one of these stories that not many people know about because there's some haftorahs about it, but it's not part of our Torah reading. But he's a fascinating character, very, very interesting character. So, all right, echad shedechafo legechazi b'shtei yadav. Okay, so one was a punishment because Elisha has this famous feud with his student Gehazi. Gehazi becomes his most important student and also kind of his secretary. And he goes around and makes appointments for him, and brings messages for him. So he's his assistant, his secretary, and then they have a feud. And Elisha pushes him away. It becomes an idiomatic phrase. Excuse me. Elisha pushes him away with 2 hands. And later in the Talmud, you have this very important expression: never push away somebody with 2 hands. Always push away somebody with 1 hand, so you can bring them back. So it's a lesson about rebuking. Don't rebuke. You can rebuke. You should rebuke, but don't rebuke with the sense that you're burning your bridge totally. If you're going to push away with 1 hand, so you can always take people back. But Elisha here sins. He gets so angry at Gehazi, he pushes him away with both hands. And there's several times in Talmudic literature where they use Elisha's rebuking of Gehazi as a cautionary tale. Don't do this. Don't push people away. Even if someone is sinning, doing terrible things, push them away, but with 1 hand, not with 2 hands. Okay, so they're suggesting that Elisha was punished for that, got sick, and then recovered. Maybe did tshuva, repented, and he recovered. Ve'echad shegeirad dubim batinokot. And there was another time. This is a crazy story. I remember reading this maybe the first time in rabbinical school, and I already had a good rabbinic education, but I wasn't aware of the story. So one time, Elisha was being teased by these children. You familiar with this story? So he's being teased by these children because he was bald, and the children were teasing him and calling him Baldy. And Elisha was very sensitive. And let me tell you right away that you don't want to tease a prophet. Because prophets have, yes. So Elisha sicks a bear on them, and the bear kills them.
Oh my goodness.
So Elisha's a little oversensitive too, because the kids dared to tease him. So, and God didn't like that. That's an overreaction. That's really pushing people away with two hands. So I'm not sure it's clear that he knew the bear was going to kill them, but he got very mad and he sticks the bear on them. Anyhow, God punishes him for that. He gets sick. And the third one, which it doesn't say which incident caused this, is the one that killed him. Shneamar, Elisha chalad cholyo asher yamut bo. Elisha became sick with the sickness that would kill him. That's the end of the little Elisha story here. All right. Now it's interesting. Without even any punctuation, I mean we have the punctuation in our Steinsaltz version, but in the regular Talmud, you go right back to our original subject, which was in my memory about 25 years ago. It was a very long time ago, but it was about how you're supposed to treat employees. Yeah. and I'll just have to quote it for you. Ella, ad shelo yatchilu b'mlacha. Save emor lahem, al manat she'en lachem alai ela pat v'kitnin chulei. So this was the halachic difficulty that we were encountering many, many weeks ago, which was that, if you remember, the father tells his son, go hire some workers and draw up a contract. Right. And in the contract it says, we are responsible for meals. Now the father panics and says, what do you mean just meals? You have to be... This is what got us into this whole discussion in the first place, because every Jew deserves the greatest meal possible. And the argument is that a meal of Solomon? Is that a meal of Abraham? So the father says, no, write down in the contract, look, you deserve a great meal, but all I can afford is bread and beans, lechem v'kitnit. So sort of like hummus and pita, you could say, right? Okay. Yeah. And then make sure that's in the contract. And just to remind you, then there was a rabbi that says he didn't have to bother to do that, because when it comes to providing meals, you go by the minhag medina, the local custom, and whatever the local custom is. So even if they were requesting a banquet, like Abraham served his guests, they don't get it because they get minhag medina. They get the local custom anyway. Amar le Rav Acha, bereda Rav Yosef. So Rav Acha said in the name of Rav Yosef, le Rav Chisda, to Rav Chisda, pat kitnit tnan, o pat vikitnit tnan. Okay, so is it that you get bean bread, which means that there's no vav, there's no and between beans and bread. So is it, do you give them bean bread and that's all you give them? Or do you give them bread and beans? And so the difference is vav, the Hebrew letter vav. Vav, as you know, is just a single letter. It means, and it's connected. So one little letter could make a difference in the meal. Is the meal bean bread or is it bread and beans? Bread and beans is better. And in case you didn't know, it is. It's better. It's better. By the rabbis, it's considered better. Okay, turn the page, 167. So Rav Chisda says back to them, now we have one of the very few instances of somebody swearing in the Talmud. I'm not aware of very many others, particularly this. Yes, that's right. So Charlie, just calm down. It's not. You know what? It's not. It's not such a terrible swear word. I've referred to others. There's worse in the Bible, by the way. At some point, I'll show you the swear words in the Bible. There's some terrible swear words in the Bible. This isn't one of them. But 167, Amar le Ha-Elohim. That's it. Ha-Elohim means my God. Yeah, he's using the Lord's name in vain. Because he's not praying and he's not studying. He's saying my God. Ha-Elohim. Sricha vav ki morda de librot. We need the vav there to be as big as an oar in a boat. Oar is that you row with or you're paddling with, right? Yeah, because that vav is very important. So make sure it's in the contract. Don't skimp on the ink when writing the vav, because it's the difference between bean bread and beans and bread. Yeah, right. Bean bread sounds barely edible to me. Forgive me. I mean, I don't know if you made bean bread. Whereas hummus and pizza, you can sit and that's a real meal. Okay. That's what you give your. That's what you give your. Yeah. Actually, they do make Verse 3, number 3. Yeah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer ein tzarich. So now we go back quoting the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says this whole thing is unnecessary. The whole story is not necessary. Hakol kamin hagamedina, because we know hakol, everything. We're going to examine that, but everything is according to local custom. And now the question is hakol atue mai. Everything is according to local custom. What do you mean everything? How could everything be according to local custom? And here we're actually just talking about the meal the employer is required to provide. But you say everything is according to local custom. Does that mean salary? What exactly does that mean? All right, so now we're going to examine hakol. La'atui hatitnan. It includes this. So here's why you need the word. Why not just say min hagamidina? When it comes to food, follow min hagamidina. Are you adding something in particular when you say everything beyond just the food? And they're saying yes, because you need it to solve this particular case, which came to court. Hasocher et hapoel ve'amar lo. Someone who hires workers and says to him, I'm going to pay you ke'echad v'chishnai mimnei ha'ir. I'm going to pay you like one or two other people in the city. So it sounds like he's trying to say min hagamidina, the local custom, but he's not saying it that way. He's saying, I'm going to pay you like one or two other people get paid.
Yeah, minimum wage.
And then what happened, of course? Notain lo kipachut baskiro. He just gave him the lowest amount, like one or two. Well, what I meant was not just minimum, the lowest. Well, that would be the minimum, right? Yeah, I'm going to pay you like lowest. Divrei Yoshua. So Rabbi Yoshua said that was okay, but v'chachamim, the sages say, Omrim mishamnim beinehem. So Rabbi Yoshua says, Chachamim, the sages say, you take the average wage. So min hagamidina in that case is you take the average wage. Now it doesn't mean the average wage like a brain surgeon and a software engineer and the lawnmower guy. It doesn't mean that. It means of that particular field, right? Of that particular trade, you take the average wage. You don't give the highest, you don't give the lowest, the average wage. And the average wage is considered min hagamidina. Okay. Next page. I suppose that's the concept of minimum wage, is the average. And it's the marketplace kind of decides it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, because there are people who earn less than that. So you don't just find two people who get the least amount in the town. You
Yeah, I mean, the least could be an apprentice that doesn't get paid at all.
Right.
Like a 12-year-old doesn't get paid at all. All right, anyway. Page 168, so a new Mishnah. Okay, and I think that we'll do this Mishnah and maybe have time to analyze it a bit. Still on the subject of providing food for your workers. The elu ochlim mina Torah. The following people, because of commandments in the Torah itself, in the Torah text itself, you have to provide with food. It actually means more specifically that they can eat on the job. And eating on the job, but it means like people that are picking crops can actually eat the crops. That's what it means. So these are the people that are allowed to eat of their work. Okay, there's lots of people that work with food. Grocery store workers work with food, right? It would be difficult to have a policy where you're allowed to eat whatever you want, right? Although you could imagine that, that's your you work on the grocery store and I'm paying you by eating whatever you want, or of course there's people that pick crops and you eat whatever you want, and so there's some people where the Torah specifies as part of their, it's not the only part of their compensation, but as part of their compensation they can eat whatever they want. Okay, and it's based on a verse. Now it's interesting. It's a verse that's kind of taken out of context. It doesn't appear to mean that, but it becomes important to them in the way they treat workers. So I'm just going to read it. Eloch li min Torah. Ha'oseh b'mechubar lakarka. People that are working with crops that are stuck to the ground. Mechubar lakarka. Crops that are stuck to the ground. B'sha'at gemar malacha. And their job then is to pick them. And of course once they pick them, they set them aside as part of the produce that the farmer is going to bring to market. Also, uve talush min karka, or it's loose from the ground, ad shelo nigmara malachato, until the work is finished. Uve davar shegidu lo min haaretz, or anything that's grown in the ground. So let me explain a few things that's important to understand. First of all, the work of picking crops, what we think of as the work of picking crops is you pick the crop and you set it aside. Of course, then somebody has to do other things to it, right? Wash it or sort it or find the good stuff and remove them. And then you're taking it to the market and you're setting it up at a marketplace. So there's all those jobs you have to do. Some of it involves picking. So the thing is that for the Talmud has to figure out when, the Mishnah actually has to figure out when is the job done. So when is that crop picker's work done? When are the people that kind of just gather the crops together? When's it done? And they decide almost arbitrarily, but it's an interesting way of defining it, that it's done when you've done maser. So maser is tithing. When you've tithed, and you, because someone's got, remember, tithing is 10% goes to the priests. Right. Someone has to do the counting, someone has to do the sorting, and then once you tithe, you got 10% to go to the priests, and the rest is the stuff that you're allowed to sell, you're allowed to make profit from, and that other people are allowed to eat, because there's this whole system that once you've tithed and you set aside the 10th for the priests, it's now kodesh. It's holy stuff. Only priests are allowed to eat it. Non-priests are not allowed to eat it. So what they're saying is the work of farming, let's say, the work of harvesting is completed. We call it completed after tithing. So
is that the last thing that happens, tithing?
Well, it's not. I mean, the last thing that happens is that, people buy it, they take it to the marketplace. So the consumer eats it, the consumer buys it and turns it into flour. A lot of the other things could happen. But in terms of if you're hired to do the harvest staff, their work is done when it's tithed, when the produce is tithed.
And you eat it before you tithe.
Well, good question. Good question.
Yeah, what you're doing is working off a smaller base.
Yeah. The answer to that, it's a good question, but the answer is yes for the crop workers, because that's what. In fact, that's exactly what it says. Those workers can eat at any point along the line. At any point along the line, they get hungry, they can eat. All right. Now the assumption is, there's not that many workers. There's a huge amount of crops, so it's not going to be. Anybody ever done this before? Like you work in kibbutz and yeah.
I worked in the kitchen. We could eat whatever we want.
Is that right? Yes, because there are. I worked. Look, I worked in an orchard before. There's only so many oranges that you want to eat. Believe me, there's a lot more oranges than there are workers. So some farmers, some big industrial. They have that rule. You eat as many grapes as you want, eat as many strawberries as you want, because there's many more, and that's part of the compensation. And that's kind of what it says. That's what it said. These workers are allowed from the Torah. This is the Torah actually requires the employer to allow them to eat.
You cannot take it home.
You can't take it home.
No.
You can't take it home.
No,
Yeah.
but I think I've been at places even in this country where pick your own raspberries, let's say.
Yes, right.
So
yeah.
strawberries, right?
Yeah, that's right.
If you eat a few, nobody's watching to see that you don't eat a few, and there's no rule that you can't eat a few.
And people do.
People do. That you pay for the basket.
You pay for the basket, right? Yeah, and the same thing. You very quickly run out of an appetite for.
Right.
Yeah, I've had quite a few too many strawberries. As much as you might love strawberries. Yeah.
Right.
My dad had an ice cream store.
Yeah.
You could eat.
Yeah.
Workers can eat every ice cream they want.
Is that right? That's interesting. Yeah.
It goes down. In
Yeah.
the beginning, they eat a lot.
Yeah, that's right. And people who work at restaurants, there's so yeah. Anyhow, so this is so sometimes that's just a policy. I doubt that's a law. This makes it a law, right? This makes, okay.
I would guess this does not apply to a gold mine.
right. It's eating.
No grazing allowed.
Yeah, or bookstores. Like I've worked at a bookstore, and I felt like I should be able to take home whatever I want. But all right, let's finish the Mishnah. We'll finish the Mishnah.
Many books do you want?
Ve'elu she'ein ochlim. All right, but the following cannot, because you can't be right. I mean, the poor farmer's got to have some profit, right? So the following employees are not allowed to eat at all. Ha'useh b'mechubar lakarka b'sha'a she'ein gemar melacha. People that work with stuff that comes from the ground, but it's not after. So it's basically after the work. So after the work would be after tithing. There's still work to do, right? There's still work to do. But you have to make it pretty for the marketplace. You're going to sort through it and figure, okay, this I'm going to sell, this I'm not going to sell. You have to stand in front of it as a worker. There's all sorts of things that you could do with food, with produce, after it's been tithed. Those people are not allowed to eat. Now I suppose a generous employer could come up with something, but the person who's selling it in the marketplace, or who's, if they're done, you're putting in boxes, taking it to the marketplace, after tithing, they are not allowed to eat. Uva talush min akarka, and anything that's loose from the ground, me'achar shenigmara melachto, same thing if it's loose from the ground, after you're done with the work, which is tithing. Uva davar she'en gidulo min aretz, and of course anything that doesn't grow in the ground, you can't just eat. So that would be like a finished product, like bread. Bread actually doesn't grow in the ground. No. So, it takes extra work. And everything about bread's already been tithed. All of the produce has already been tithed. So anything, or candy, things like, so if you're working from something that doesn't grow from the ground, directly from the ground, then you're not allowed just to eat it.
Well, just eat grain.
It's not just grain, though. There's apples and strawberries.
It doesn't do anybody any good if you work with wheat.
Right. Right. So yeah, you get better to get a job at an apple orchard. But you know, maybe people I think chew on grain. Yeah. So yeah, it's a better deal to be able to eat something that comes directly from the ground. All right. So we'll stop there.
Is there any suggestion